Joining me now, great friend and mentor, Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker and Fox News contributor. Newt, it's great to see you. I'm reading your piece here. Grocery costs, woes, dominate among voter concerns about the economy. Okay, I get that, but you know what? This thing's starting to turn. Inflation coming down, prices are coming down. I read off some of them from John Carney's playbook, but prices are coming down all over the place, Newt. Can't we talk about that? Can't the president talk about that?
Oh, look, I think he can talk about it, but remember, in the end, I think it comes down to the price of gasoline, which is going to be very good for him. It's going to go down, lowest it's been in a very long time, and that's the equivalent of a tax cut for most working Americans. Second, I think, is passing a bill to get real transparency in healthcare. Health is the #2 way that people measure the cost of living. Groceries is #1. So if the transparency, you're going to start seeing market forces at work. You're going to see prices come down in healthcare, which the president's already started with things like his drug program. Third, you've got groceries. And the whole point of the America's New Majority Project poll, which is what that came from, is to let the American people tell us what they're going to measure. I agree with you that we are turning the corner. But if you're an average American, as you'll remember, for example, from the disaster that George H.W. Bush had, because the economy turned too late for the politicians to be able to use it. So there's about a 3-month lag. My guess, and I've said this all along, by July, you're going to have a Trump boom and Democrat boom, and the country's going to get to choose. Do you want to go back to Biden and gloom, or do you want to keep going forward with Trump and a boom? And I think the Republicans are going to have a winning hand come November. But we're not there yet, and we just need to be honest about what has to be done to finish the job.
Well, how about bragging on a 34% drop in egg prices and a 9% or 10% drop in gasoline prices? I'd start there. Eggs and gas. I remember about a year ago, everyone was screaming about egg prices because the Bidens had made some terrible mistakes killing chickens and stuff that I don't really know much about. But Brooke Rollins came to the rescue, Agriculture Secretary, changed the policies, and now eggs down 34%, and gasoline's down, what is it? What did I say? 9%. Okay, regular unleaded gas down 9%, and it's going lower. It's going lower because we have record oil and gas production. I mean, that's a good place to start, isn't it? Those two things,
sure, it's a great
eggs
place,
and gasoline.
Look, Abraham Lincoln once said, with popular sentiment, nothing can fail. Without popular sentiment, nothing can succeed. My only point, and the whole purpose of the America's New Majority Project, is to let the American people tell us what they believe, what they're experiencing, what they care about. If you can find a way to echo the American people, you are extraordinarily strong. If you're trying to teach them something they don't already believe, it's really hard, particularly if every day they're not being reinforced. So I think Trump is in perfect shape to go to a State of the Union and say, we have turned the corner, we are making progress, we have more to do, and it's going to be better. And the choice of going forward with us to dramatic economic growth or sliding back to where Joe Biden headed is not a choice for most Americans. That's the case. We have to make a choice election, not a referendum. If we do that, I think we will win. But we should start always with where are the American people? The American people want it, and you're right, Brooke. Look, Brooke is a brilliant leader. She's a great Secretary of Agriculture. She'll get all this. And I suspect you'll see more effort to bring down prices over the next 6 months. If people are relatively happy in midsummer and the economy's growing the way you and I think it will, and I think it's going to be terrific. The other thing I would say, Larry, not to be negative, but to be honest, the Republican Party is guilty of basically almost criminal malpractice on the tax bill. As you pointed out a minute ago, every person who is earning tips is getting a tax break. Every emergency worker who was out helping in Nashville is getting a tax break on overtime. The senior citizens, 80% of them, are getting a tax break. parents with children are getting a tax break. The Republicans have done such a weak job of communicating, by the way, on every single one of these. The Democrats voted no.
Well, the
Choice could not be clearer.
president told me when I sat down last week, he acknowledged, he said, we've got to get the word out. We've got to be stronger to get the word out. And the State of the Union is going to be one key place. He's already traveling on the road. I think it's interesting, though. So we know that every Democrat voted against the One Big Beautiful Bill. So they, Democratic Party basically voted for a $5 trillion tax hike, right? And if they ever get back into power, they'll do it again. Trump closed the border, and he's getting rid of the worst of, he's deporting the worst of the worst criminals. Democrats want to end ICE. They want to defund ICE. They want to reopen the border. I think those are their policies. However they try to couch it, those are their policies. So I think you got to lay that out too. But let me ask you something. Why? We got the unemployment rate coming down. It's 4.3%, okay, which is a good number. Just came down in the January number. Fine. I'll bet you we could get that down even more. We're going to grow it at least 3.5%, maybe 5 or 6%, who knows. But as you're writing, and it's a good point, there's still 7 million people unemployed. There's too much emphasis. There's just too much emphasis on disabilities. There's not enough emphasis on work. People, able-bodied people, should be, should have to work rather than just getting all welfare. Ronald Reagan said work is the best social program. That's probably worth repeating and discussing at some point, because why shouldn't 7 million people be back in the labor force, for heaven's sakes? And if you did that, you're going to save a ton of money on welfare, which is already haunted by all this fraud, waste, and abuse.
Well, look, you're also going to save a lot of lives. I mean, people who have no purpose, who are sitting at home, who feel defeated and depressed, are always, first of all, a danger to themselves. So getting them back into the economy, giving them a sense of hope for a better future, all of this is very, very important. And I think this August is the 30th anniversary of welfare reform, which we passed, most successful conservative social reform in our lifetime. Millions went back to work. Children rose from poverty. The biggest improvement in children's income was after the Welfare Reform Act. I hope the Republicans in Congress are going to pick this up. We also have the technology, frankly, to turn most disabilities into capabilities. People don't have to sit at home, draw a check, do nothing, and decay. We can offer them a real chance to pursue happiness. And I think that's our moral obligation as Americans.
Love that. Love that. Work is so important. Work is godly, among other things. Newt Gingrich, wonderful to see you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Good to be with you.